Welcome to the EchoCast. I am Bon, and this is a podcast about video game news, speculation, reviews, whatever else I feel like talking about. This week we'll chat about the E3 missing the big three, a litany of games as a service games shutting down, a Titanfall single player game canceled, and much more. A few things before we get started. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, and if you're on Spotify or iTunes, please leave a review. Do it right now. I know how many reviews there are. There better be at least 5 more reviews. Okay, now that you've done that, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment with your thoughts below, or just say hi. A huge thanks to supporter level patrons PK, The Dawn, and Cage Nephilim, and a special thanks to producer level patron Hassan. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and getting free, ad-free episodes, please check out patreon.com/BonDiesel. You can get that for as little as $1. Gaming news. So let's dive into it. Lots of small stories this week, so we'll see how long this episode lasts. E3 is not getting the big three. There isn't a ton to talk about here. It basically is that Nintendo, Sony, and Xbox are not going to be at E3 this year, which has been confirmed by various sources in various articles and stuff like that. The part of it that you haven't heard talked about as much is that it sounds like I think everyone besides EA will be there. So you're talking like Ubisoft, Capcom, Konami, Square Enix, all like. So I guess I just want to like initially dispel that like I've seen a lot of like doom and gloom about this because people hate E3. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and now everyone wants E3 to suck, and that's a bummer. But so I went to E3 in 2018. I was sponsored by Ubisoft. I was there as a star player for The Division. It was for the reveal of Division 2, which was really, really cool, admittedly. And here's a few things about that. Those conferences are amazing. The Ubisoft conference was so cool. I imagine the Xbox conference across the street and all these different conferences are amazing, right? The show floor kind of sucks. And I don't think that's like E3 sucks now thing. I think it's just the way it is. I think E3 is one of those things that many of us always imagined going to and never was able to actually do it. And so we have all of these these hopes and dreams and aspirations for what E3 would be. And it maybe didn't live up to that, at least not for me, right? I don't think people should be as doom and gloom as they are. I think some of the journalists and content creators I've seen really dogging on E3 for not having the big three were people who were maybe part of the ESA, who owns E3, the ESA leak of all of their info, like their phone numbers, addresses, full names. Obviously, pretty understandable to be beefing about that. But it also kind of seems like it's just they know the people who listen to the videos and podcasts will like get all hyped about them ripping on E3. I think the biggest thing that frustrates me is how a lot of the people ripping on E3 have just been like slobbering over Jeff Keighley and the Summer Game Fest, while kind of not acknowledging that the Summer Game Fest in 2022 was abysmal. It was like 3 hours long. It had like 1 or 2 interesting announcements, and it just wasn't good. It was bad. Keighley has a really bad habit of making these shows about him finding a famous person to come on because he wants the clout, about having a ton of ads and paid things. Last year, famously, either at Gamescom or his SGF. I can't remember, Glenn Schofield, who went on to release the Callisto Protocol, like literally groveled to Jeff Keighley. And so while everyone is like saying E3 is dead and SGF is taking over, I think like Jeff Keighley's vanity could end up making that not actually happen. I think worst case scenario for E3, it just stays kind of irrelevant. And Keighley never really reaches the heights of E3. I think best case scenario, they both do well, which is my preference. A time in the industry where like SGF and E3 could push each other to be better would be ideal. Anytime there's one top dog in the industry, they tend to get lazy and not do well, which is what you saw with E3 for the most part. And then obviously COVID and lots of other issues sink that. I don't know. I just like, I don't think them missing out on the big three is that big of a deal. In the final few years of E3 before COVID, Xbox and Sony weren't in there anyways, and Nintendo was, but not with that big of a presence. And so, you know, E3 is a coming together of people. E3 is a place where third parties can really have their chance. I really think there's been a lot of discounting how important third parties are in the industry, and how in a lot of ways, you know, like they sell more, they're typically better known than the first party games. So yeah, you're missing out on those big announcements from Xbox and Sony and Nintendo, I guess, but you're also still going to get the information and the demos and stuff from the biggest publishers and developers in the world, right? So I don't see it. I think the new E3 is going to be great. It's being done by a new company. The ESA basically has nothing to do with it. They're just letting, and the company who is doing it has done PAX, which people seem to universally enjoy. You know, they have a few days specifically for journalists and creators. That's in a whole separate part of the building. And then they have a few days just for fans, which is a different part of the building. Like, so it's so funny that like a lot of these, especially podcasters, especially these bigger names in the industry, for years I've listened to them say E3 really needs to give more time to the journalists and the creators to allow time for that mixing together and melding of minds, and allowing them to have their own space to do what they need to do and still cater to the fans. And that's what they're doing. They're changing things up. And now you have all these journalists and stuff being like, well, it's not going to be as good as it used to be, when they used to complain how it used to be. So it's pretty frustrating for me, if I have to be honest. And you can probably tell they are just being kind of hypocritical, I think, and essentially vaguely wishing for it to fail, which sucks. Like, we shouldn't want that. We should want it to do well. At least I do. So that's where I stand. I'm excited for E3. I believe it's going to be E3, and then like the following week, SGF. I don't think SGF is going to get Nintendo and Sony and Xbox either. I just don't. I think they're all they're going to hang out like in the middle or right outside. You'll probably see an Xbox conference right in the middle of the two. You'll probably see a Sony thing in the vicinity. Nintendo will do whatever Nintendo does. You never know. I want E3 to be good. A game industry where E3 is cool again is a good industry. And I think we could use it. So let's talk about all of the games as a service games shutting down. So this week we had the announcement of a bunch of games shutting down, namely Apex Legends Mobile, Battlefield Mobile. It was only in beta, but it was being tested. Knockout City, the dodgeball game. Rumbleverse, which was the battle royale that was wrestling based. And Back 4 Blood. Back 4 Blood, I think, is a weird name on that list. It was like kind of a game as a service. That was the Left 4 Dead, what was essentially a Left 4 Dead clone. And it had like DLCs that came out, but it is ending development. And so, you know, each of these obviously has their own story. Like Apex Legends, I just personally can't imagine it translates to mobile very well. Same with Battlefield. I just have a feeling, you know, the way that like Fortnite and some other games do really well on mobile, that those probably don't. Knockout City and Rumbleverse, I'm a big Kind of Funny fan. I consume almost all of their content. I felt like I knew a lot more about those two games than basically anyone else, because they pushed those games really hard. They were very supportive, which was super cool. But at the end of the day, they were both like really gimmicky, and I don't know. I didn't think they were very good. I played both of them, and I thought Knockout City was abysmal. And some people really, really talk well about it. I thought it felt terrible to play. And then Rumbleverse, like, I understood the shtick, but like, I'm a shooter guy, and I'm not into wrestling and like professional wrestling and stuff. So it seemed like it was cute for people into that, but you're really going to like a fairly small group of people that you're shooting for to make a game like that happen. Now, Knockout City has been out for like 2 years, right? A bit more. Rumbleverse has been like 6 months. And there's just so much saturation in this field, because even the games who do well in that category, the games as a service, Destiny being the big one, Warframe being up there, and then you have like the second tier of like the Division and stuff like that. You know, those games, like, it seems like their biggest fans still hate them because they never get content fast enough. The balance is never right. They're mostly looter games, so people complain about balance and all of that. They all try PvP and they all suck at it. It's like, so you have these new games coming into this category where the established games are probably doing okay or well, but people hate them. Fortnite being the one that I would say is like S tier, and then you have Destiny as like A tier, and then you have everything else. Warframe is probably up there in A tier as well. Just no one ever talks about it. I think a big part of it, you know, I talked to a developer from Ubisoft today about it, and kind of asked them, like, you know, why do you think this is happening? And they reference like financial issues, you know, people being a little bit tighter with their money and stuff like that, which is for sure. It's just saturation. There's just too many. Because the thing with these games, like, I'm really enjoying a lot of games right now. And when I think about jumping into an Apex, jumping into a Battlefield 2042, they're fun and they're good games, but I know to really get something out of them, I basically only can play them. Well, even right there's a problem. There's 2 games that both are vying for every bit of my playtime. But then you add in 5-6 other games, single player games or strategy games or whatever, that I also want to play. And I have to start making decisions. And honestly, when that happens, if I could only play one game, it would be a games as a service, obviously. But if I want to play 6 games, I may kick out the games as a service entirely, because it's hard to just play one of those games for 30 minutes. You just don't get much out of it. You may not even be able to finish a round of like Battlefield or something, right? So I don't think it's that big of a mystery, especially these ones like the Knockout City and Rumbleverse were basically like gimmicks. I hope these studios made a lot of money. I think they were both on Game Pass. I think they've both been on the Sony equivalent. So they've gotten big checks from the big players, right? And I'm sure they sold some cosmetics and stuff like that. But I really hope these studios say, okay, that was cool. Let's do something more sustainable. Let's do something that we can make, put out, and then just move on, instead of worrying about, oh, how are we going to support this for 5 years? Like, I really think people are getting a lot of fatigue of this whole idea of like just playing the same game for years and waiting months for new content and then blowing through that content in 2 weeks. and just, if that, sometimes a couple days. So I just, I'm curious to see how things play out. The thing you need to realize is that when you start seeing obvious market issues, you won't see a change in the games for 2 or 3 years, because games have been in development for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And if they're supposed to come out in the next 12 months, well, if it's a BR or a games as a service, it's too late. It's too late to change now. We saw Battlefield 2042 try to do that. It was pretty obviously supposed to be more based on the extraction mode it had, and it didn't work out well. It didn't work out well. And they obviously tried to change course at the end. It didn't go well. And now a year and a half later, that game is amazing. There's a new patch this week. I'll talk about it. It's so fun. So these games are shutting down because there's too many of them. Many of them are very gimmicky, where they're fun for a day or two and that's it. And there's just, people aren't spending a lot of money. So even if your game is good, you may not make much money off of it. It's just the way it is. I'm really curious to see how things play out in the next 4 or 5 years. I think it's going to change. Speaking of canceled games, the Titanfall Legends game has been canceled. This was a game in development at Respawn, a team about 50. So the game has been shut down, which means that these people have been relieved of their duties. Some of them, I believe, have been assigned to other departments and studios and positions, but some were let go, or no longer working. This was supposed to be a Titanfall Apex Legends single player game. You would play as Blisk, and you'd be getting help from other legends to get powers. And you would see BT again from Titanfall 2, and the Titans would be treated kind of like relics, like classic cars that are very powerful still and well renowned, but they aren't being made and they aren't common anymore. So I have a hot take. First, obviously, thoughts to all those people who lost their jobs. That sucks. It's been that time of the year. It's been that kind of couple months. Props to them for working hard. Big thoughts out to them that it came to nothing. That said, this game sounds stupid. I don't want to play as an Apex Legend in a Titanfall game. I want to play in a war between the IMC and the militia or whatever. I want to play as a pilot. I don't want to be a character from a free-to-play battle royale game. I want to be a pilot, and I want to learn more about this really cool world and the conflicts that are going on, and I want to learn about all of this stuff. Titanfall 1 told its story through a bunch of multiplayer missions, but they did it pretty well, but it was still fairly minimal, the lore. Titanfall 2 expanded on that a lot. Even Apex Legends has expanded a lot of lore, and some of it pertaining to the Titanfall games. But this is such an interesting world and such an interesting story, both that we've played directly and heard of, that it's such a shame that they were going to do this as a single player game. I've seen people that were are really bummed that this sounded really cool. But I don't want to play as a legend. We have Apex Legends, and in that context, they're really cool. But you try to throw all of them into the actual world of Titanfall, it's just gonna feel silly, in my opinion. I would have really disliked this, and so I'm glad it's not happening. I'm super bummed out for the people who were working on it. They need to make Titanfall 3, and I've argued that this may be a move that puts that closer to reality than we were before. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I think Respawn is working on 3 different Star Wars games, 1 that we know about, 2 that we don't. They're doing they're just doing a lot. They're still working on Apex Legends and things like that. So I fear that they won't have time to do a Titanfall game for a long time, but I want a Titanfall 3. Put me in the seat of a Titan, make me a pilot, show me some epic war scenes going on, show me, teach me something about the world I don't know, bring me a new character to get attached to, a new mech to get attached to, whatever. I don't care, but don't. I'm glad this didn't happen. I don't want an Apex Legends single player game. I want a Titanfall game. And at least for now, we're not getting it. So let me know if you disagree. I'm curious. Let me know down in the comments or on Twitter or something. Oh, the Division 2. Let's talk about it quickly. The Division 2, well, I had two things happen, or two things I want to talk about. So Season 11 was supposed to come out this coming week. They were going to do a stream, I think, on February 7th, and that has been delayed. They put up one of the famous Twitter posts now, where it's a letter to the community saying that there was issues with like localization. So what that probably means is the system they use to translate audio and text to a bunch of different places around the world. Ubisoft is really good with localization. They do a lot of variations. Something went wrong with that, and they're going to delay. And I believe it's indefinite. They didn't say how long. I mean, there's a few factors here. This season wasn't going to be interesting. It was going to be some new gear, some changes, and another manhunt, which are fine. But like, we weren't getting a new mode. As far as we know, nothing big was happening. So it's whatever. The problem is with the Division is they just, I think in an effort to be transparent and to interact, they just own themselves so often. Like, they didn't need to give us a date for that. Like, they were going to do this live stream on Tuesday. They could have just told us Monday. They could have, and if they had done that when they found out on Friday, we can't do this, we would have never known any different. It's just like, the last thing this franchise needs is more black eyes. And this is just another one. And it's such a bummer, man. I'm not super excited for this content, but I was willing to play it. I was going to jump in. And now it just leaves another sour note in your mouth. And this was already delayed. This is another delay. I believe this was supposed to come out in December. So obviously they took out the new mode that was supposed to come. They've done a lot of finagling. I know the devs are working hard. I know they're talented. I know that this was beyond their control, but it still just looks bad. And there were decisions made before that could have made this not as painful. But here we are. We'll get it eventually. The other thing is, in the Division community, if you're familiar with Destiny or even WoW and stuff like that, when you complete raids or this really tough content, you get rewards that are specific to that content. Well, in the Division 2, there were 2 raids. One of them was, God, 3.5 years ago now. The second one came out sometime after that. And they have guns that you can only get in those raids. Well, with this new patch that's eventually coming, that just got delayed, they're supposed to have those exotics now, 3 years later, in the loot pool, in the Dark Zone. That's the PvP area where all bets are off. Anyone can kill you, basically. It's a shit show. Because the PvP in the Division 2 is just god-awful. And there's a bunch of people flipping out and being like, well, I earned that exotic by playing the raid. The raids in the Division 2 are just whatever. For the people who wanted raids, it seems like they're fine. For the 97% of other players, no one cared. And in fact, I bet a really large percentage of people would have preferred incursions again. Those were missions in the first game that took, I think, 4 people, but they were basically mini raids, and they were so great. And then these raids come out, they do 8-player raids in a game that a franchise that notoriously loses player base after new content very quickly. And then here comes the boo birds. We'll just go into Discord and LFG. Well, I've tried that and I've had multiple results, and I've seen this corroborated by other people. It's people who are like speed running and don't want new people who don't know everything perfectly. Or it's people who are willing to work with newbies but are super cringy about it, who are super toxic about it. I'm sure there's groups who run people through raids who are great, but my experience and the experience I've seen from other people is that that's not the case. So there's not a chance that the average person has 7 friends still playing this game. If they do, somehow, the content, it's just not that good. Like, it's not that interesting. It is interesting. Like, both of the raids I was really interested in for the day or two until they were completed. Then you see the mechanics, you get the gimmick, and you move on. I will say I do have a slight bias because someone who worked on the raids was extremely toxic about me not loving the raids, and then like blocked me on everything, and now gets retweeted by other devs all the time because he stands up against toxic communities, even though he's a toxic MFer himself. But whatever, I had to get that jab out there, but I'll leave it there. But this weirdness with these exotic guns going into the loot pool of the DZ, which most people don't play that either. Like, let's be clear. It's just so stupid. It's gatekeepy. It's kind of lame. The excuses I've seen, it's just like, it's as if these weapons like signified their greatest victory in life when it was completing this shitty raid. Like, who cares? Good job. High five. Your reward is your arm patch or whatever. I don't get it. I think it's dumb. And I think that the problem with a game like The Division is that it loses player base really quickly every time they get a boost from new content and stuff. And a big part of that is that some of the community, not all of it, but a loud part of the community is really toxic, is really gatekeepy. It's just like kind of weird. Like, there's people who like are obsessed with The Division's PvP. And I can understand like enjoying it just for some shits and giggles, but there's people who are like, it is their thing. And on one hand, I won't yuck your yum. On the other hand, if you're a dick about it, I will yuck your yum because your yum sucks, is bad, is badly balanced, is badly designed, is bad to the core of the game. And so it's just weird. So I'm glad they're bringing the exotics to the DZ. I wish they were bringing them to the regular loot pool. I wish you could be out there killing red bars and there would be a minuscule chance they could drop. So, take that take and suck it. Okay, Mass Effect, we'll talk a little bit about that. I am playing my first Mass Effect modded PC playthrough. It's interesting. So I don't have the list in front of me, but I basically picked up a bunch of like aesthetic and like quality of life mods. My favorite one is there's a mod for Mass Effect 1 where you can make it where Saren, who's the bad guy, looks normal at the beginning of the game, gets like slightly modified in the middle, and then is completely modified into like Reaper tech into the bad guy by the end. It is so cool. I've had a couple scenes with him. It is great. There's also a bunch of other great patches. I've really enjoyed it. I still think I just kind of enjoy the simplicity of playing a game like Mass Effect on my console. But getting a chance to see what these mods and stuff are all about has been great. I did a couple of videos this week. I did a canon choices video, so talking about not really giving some opinion, but mostly trying to find all of the big decisions that BioWare is going to have to address in the next game. It was really fun. It was really cool. I obviously talked about the endings. I talked about the Genophage and the Geth and Corian War and stuff like that. I did put up a poll that got like 50 people. It wasn't that many, but I basically said, would you be okay if the next Mass Effect has canon choices from the previous game? And a staggering 83% said yes, they were okay with that. That's interesting because you won't catch that on the subreddit and in YouTube videos and comments. But I think if you hit up the casual audience, the 95%, the people that they're going to design the game for, I think you'll see that people will understand that you're going to end up with a better game, this next game, the smaller the starting point is, so that they can re-expand it. I've talked about this 100 times, but the trilogy ends pretty broad. And if you try to make a game and taking all of that in, you have to start broad and then try to get bigger. And that's going to be almost impossible. So if you narrow it down, at least a few choices, a few big ones, you can get pretty skinny and then expand again and probably end up with a better game. So I enjoyed that. My other one was I did a scripted video for the first time in a while of my perfect Mass Effect for this next game. It got some good responses. Appreciate people who came in basically saying, oh, I agree with you completely. Like, obviously that feels great. But then people who kind of push back too. I think that's fine, as long as you're not like a jerk. One person did say they want to be a towel in the next game. So take that for what you will. So you can check those videos out on YouTube. So please look for that. Just look for Bond Diesel on there. For the scripted video, I'm conflicted. The scripted thing was fine. I'm just not a very natural reader, which comes from practice. It's also like just me. I'm not great at it, you know? And so I think I may do like a mix of scripted and kind of just, you know, having like an outline where I just kind of talk. So I may, like, if I'm introducing or talking about a specific subject, I may script like an intro that makes to make sure I clearly explain things and stuff like that, and then give myself time to kind of just talk with like an outline so I don't repeat myself, because that was some feedback. I repeat myself. I know I do, and I'm trying. So yeah, so be on the lookout for that. Not just Mass Effect videos. I'll make videos about other games as well. Dragon Age. So a couple things about Dragon Age. I actually don't even have it on here, but we have the Tom Henderson, who's a leaker. I actually think he's kind of a jerk, but he does have good info sometimes, so I guess we tolerate him. Put out a video on his Inside Gaming Twitter and website that's talking about how talking to some people who are involved in the game, the combat is supposed to be much more fast-paced. It's supposed to be very Final Fantasy 15-ish. I have no idea what that means. I haven't played that game. Also talked about how even though it's an alpha, it's playable from start to finish. It's missing voice lines. It's got like text still in there. And some of the stuff that they said was missing, Tom interpreted as like, oh, this game's not coming for at least a year. And I don't. It's so interesting sometimes when really big names in video games who hear all this stuff all the time, like, seem to like not understand how things work. Like, I've played games in alpha or beta just a couple months before release that still had like voice to or text to voice, you know, voices in it, because they didn't have the voiceover put in yet, and like missing textures and like missing like big chunks of the game. So I don't know. I'm still convinced Dragon Age comes this year, 2023. The stuff he talked about honestly made me kind of hopeful. I may be more interested in it. There was a detail that the companions, you can't control what they do specifically, just the whatever skill is their main one or something. And that was one of the reasons in his article. He said something like, you know, that leads me to believe this game's far off. That's how Andromeda is. And this game was a game that started development right after Andromeda. So it's going to have some of that DNA. And it's very possible they're just going to try to simplify the game. So that system missing doesn't mean it's not done. It just may mean it's not going to happen. So I'm surprised that he interpreted it the way he did. I believe a part of the article mentioned that, like, specifically people, you know, sources told him 2023 is unlikely, which is probably true, but I still think they're going to try to get it out, but we'll have to wait and see. On that note, I also was excited when I realized that the Dead Space remake is on Frostbite, the same as Dragon Age. And if you haven't played it yet or watched gameplay, it looks fantastic. It looks so good. It is so pretty. I found it hard to believe it was Frostbite. So if Motive was able to make Frostbite look like that, obviously in a very different context, it still gets me excited for Dragon Age, and some hope that it's going to look really good and that we will see that series get pushed forward a lot. Battlefield 2042 had a big patch. The biggest part of it is that they re-implemented the class system, which I've been playing this week quite a bit. It's a ton of fun. It's so cool. It feels like old Battlefield. It also helps that they added a bunch of the old classic maps to the base game. So like 2042. So with all the slightly near future tech and stuff, it's so fun. It's a blast. So if you have 2042 already, definitely pop in and check it out. If you are gonna buy it, try to get it on pretty significant discount, like 10 or 15 bucks, maybe 20. I think you can get your money's worth if you like Battlefield games. Yeah, it's a ton of fun, and it bums me out that the greater hive mind of the game industry has wrote that game off as soon as it released, because it's a game that, you know, there's rumors that they're starting development on a new Battlefield, and I keep seeing journalists being like, well, maybe that one will be good, and every time I just want to reach through the screen or reach through my headphones and be like, it is good. Like, obviously you should have to verify yourself, but Battlefield 2042 is a good game, and it's come a long way. It doesn't excuse the mistakes they made initially, but it's frustrating to hear people who obviously haven't played the game in months, if not over a year, still talking about it like they understand it, because they don't. But that's fine. It happens. That's why I'm here, to give you that real news. Ubisoft Snowdrop engine. This is the engine that The Division runs on, and we've heard it's going to be on a bunch of other games. So the new Splinter Cell remake, I believe the next Assassin's Creed, and so on and so forth. Well, we found out this week that the Crew Motorfest will also be on it. Now, my hot take on that is that the Crew Motorfest is useless and a pointless game for them to make, because the Crew 2 was one of the worst feeling racing games I have ever played in my entire existence. But the bright side is that another studio using Snowdrop as their engine is really setting Ubisoft Massive up as a huge player in Ubisoft now, because they're the ones who develop Snowdrop. And so everyone in the company is going to be looking to that department as they all move to that engine to make their games. And that's a big deal for Ubisoft and for Massive especially. I really, really hope, as a Division fan, this reliance on them allows them the freedom to finally make a Division game where they fully support it from start to finish, and they don't have to worry about Ubisoft, you know, picking at them and taking away the budget and doing all of their silly stuff. So I'm not excited about the Crew Motorfest. I am excited to see another game using Snowdrop. We got some information about 343, the studio who makes Halo, this week. It's been made clear that they are going to continue working on Halo Infinite. It's very likely that future projects and even current projects will include help from other studios, like contractor studios or just support studios within Xbox. They are very likely moving to Unreal Engine 5, like, completely. There's a game in the works right now called Tatanka that people are saying at one point was a BR and may still be, but also may be something bigger than that. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And that there's currently no indication that there's more single player content coming for Infinite, which is weird because they committed to supporting Infinite for 10 years. And I don't think we're going to get close to that. So, and that's a bummer, because Infinite is a good game. It just didn't work. They didn't do what they had to do, and it just didn't work. And that's fine. That's understandable, but it is still a bummer. Another bummer, I guess, maybe depending on who you are, is we found out that the Coalition, the developer of Gears of War, has canceled a small project they were working on to fully focus on the next Gears, which I believe would be Gears of War 6. Gears of War 5 was very, very well received. People seem to really enjoy it, especially a DLC called Hivebusters that came out. Is apparently like one of the best DLCs ever made, because I've heard people not like Gears of War 5 who loved Hivebusters. So, you know, take that for what you will. The Coalition is really a premier studio for Xbox. They work extremely closely with Epic, and so, you know, the development of Unreal Engine 5 is probably in pretty large part helped by the Coalition. And so, like, if you remember, the Unreal 5 demo they did with the Matrix was made by the Coalition. So they can do the thing, and they're pretty good at it. So I'm excited for that. I've never been a Gears person, but I'm just excited for them to be working on it, because Gears is like an integral part of Xbox. And so for them to have another game, it's exciting. Okay, the 4090 Ti is huge. There were some models or renders or something of the 4090 Ti came out, and it looks like it's going to be a 4 to a 4.5 cart slot card. So if you don't know what that means that this card's probably going to be like 8 inches tall. I have a decent sized mid case, an NZXT, and I am very confident that card would not fit anywhere near my computer, and I don't even know if it would fit lengthwise either. It's a big old chonker, and I am really curious. This led me to kind of spout out, some people agreed or didn't, that like I think eventually video cards, if they go the way they're going, are going to be like a case you buy, like a box that you plug into your PC, because they just won't be able to fit them in there anymore. And that is a thing. There's already external like docks basically for graphics cards where you can do that, but it's not because you have to, it's because you want to. Or it's like a external GPU for a laptop that you can plug in, and it gives your laptop like a legit GPU. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about GPUs literally so big that get so hot that they have to put them in their own cases separate from your PC, that you're going to have to just plug in. It's going to happen. Unless something big happens in the industry that allows them to go small again, that's where it's headed. So we'll see. The day before, our favorite Fate game put out its 10 minutes of gameplay finally, and it was abysmal. It was so bad. It was like 3 minutes of watching the character's butt, which was like very bodacious, but like just looked like it was off of the stock Unreal Engine 5 character. Then we watched them mod a weapon for like 3 or 4 minutes, and I saw some people being like, well, at least the weapon modification system looks good. It looked terrible. It looked so basic. It looked like a game from 10 years ago. And then they showed the character going into a city or a town area and shooting a bunch of zombies from like 100 yards away. It's funny because I believe this was someone actually playing the game, not live. It was recorded for sure. But like, I believe this was as close to real gameplay that we've seen, but predictably, it was terrible. It looked, like the first trailers they showed, if you looked close enough, you could tell it was a shit show, but it had all the right glossy things that most people kept their eyes on. And some people thought it looked really good. Well, now we see the actual game or something close to it, and it just looks terrible. It looks so bad. It's just so odd. It's such a weird situation with all their delays. And here's the funny thing is, they said that it was going to be till like November now that the game comes because of this licensing issue with the name of the game. Well, they showed the name of the game in this trailer. So in theory, that situation either never existed, one, or two, evolved very quickly. And now I don't know. It's so weird. It's such a weird situation, but here we are, and we're dealing with it. The day before is going to be just another trash Steam early access game where they talk a big talk and can't back it up with development. They don't have enough money, they don't have enough talent, and it's just going to end up being this like fluff of a game that is more known for its failures than its successes. And that's where I stand. Jedi Survivor has been delayed, the Respawn Star Wars game, from I believe it was early March to late April. It's like 6 weeks, not that big of a deal. If you could wait until March, you can wait until April. We're definitely hitting a point, I think, where we just kind of accept that games are going to get delayed. Now, if it's like a year delay and then the game still comes out kind of underwhelming, Halo, then maybe you complain. But a game getting delayed a few weeks, water off of your back. It shouldn't matter at all. Not a big deal. Thumbs up. It's all good. So I'm interested in that game. I sucked at the first one. I liked it. I was just bad at it. And so I'll check this one out for sure. We'll see if I play. And then the final story, I have stopped playing Tarkov. I haven't played Tarkov in like a week for many reasons. I just am not. It has weird vibes. Their community is super weird. The game is a hot mess. And this was exemplified for about the last week or 2 weeks that there is a bug where someone can spawn in and just be invisible. Like a player character. So, in theory, you could just run around and kill people and they would never even know you're there. And apparently it happens to NPCs as well. So you can have an NPC that can shoot at you and kill you, that's completely invisible, and you can die to them and never know any better. So the Tarkov, it's just such a Battlestate Games is just so inept and just completely unprepared and not talented enough to handle this game, especially in the stage it's in. I mean, I like the game, but there's just, because of the game and outside factors, that game just has so many weird vibes, and it'll keep going. I don't see Tarkov shutting down until the lead dev just gets bored of it, which may happen sooner than later, but I don't know. Check out Tarkov if you want. I wouldn't. And that's what we have for the stories. Let's get some listener questions. If you have your own questions, be sure to ask in our Discord, in the YouTube comments, or just hit me up on Twitter at BonDiesel or at the EchoCast. My questions this week come from Master Prime, and they asked, what is the best pre-order bonus? I mean, it's got to be statues, right? Like, I don't really have one. I've rarely ever pre-ordered like the big bundles. I pretty much always just pre-order on the website. But if we're just talking about the best prize that you can get or the best feature, it's got to be figures, right? Up here, the N7 helmet for Mass Effect is pretty cool, and there was an edition of the game that came with that. But statues, for me at least, are the coolest pre-order bonus. After seeing the Last of Us show, are you excited for the Mass Effect show? This is from Master Prime again. I mean, kind of. The problem is the Last of Us show is on HBO. And HBO kind of don't miss. The problem with the Mass Effect show is I believe it's supposed to be on Amazon, which I think they have Jack Ryan, Jack Reacher. They had a show with Hugh Laurie that I really liked. They have some good shows. I trust Prime, Amazon Prime, more than I trust Netflix. So I'm willing to give it a go. It's exciting. It's gonna be hard for any other show to beat The Last of Us from what I've seen. They're treating that IP with a lot of respect. That IP translates really well, and they're doing a good job with it. And having Neil Druckmann involved is something you're probably not going to get for every game media. So it makes me, I'm willing. I wish the Mass Effect thing was just going to be animated. I would take like a Cyberpunk or the League of Legends show, Arcane. I would take that. I think that'd be perfect. And it would probably treat the aliens with a lot more respect. You could get the voice actors in there. That's what I would like to see, but we'll have to wait and see what they actually do. And then Master Prime asked if I would like the show to be canon to the story. Sure. I would hope the show would try to explore a part of Mass Effect that we haven't seen before, with characters that we haven't dealt with. I'm not completely against them trying to cast Shepard or whatever, but a lot of people are against it. And so I kind of just would rather see them just try something, some kind of offshoot spinoff. Hell, make it from Andromeda. I don't know. But I would like it to be canon. I would like it to matter, I guess. And so thank you for those questions, Master Prime. And that's where we are. We come to the end of the show. This was a longer one, like I expected. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm really happy to get feedback on the show if you're willing to provide it again in the Discord, on my Twitters, or in the YouTube comments. Feel free to let me know. You can find me all over the internet as Bond Diesel. That includes Twitter, YouTube, and over on Twitch and Instagram. That's all I have. So until next time.